from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Caroline Hyde in for Emily Chan. This is Bloomberg Technology. And coming up in the next hour, President Biden targets big tech in an executive order. We have the details from Washington. Plus, Visa expands into the world of crypto amid talking about the evolving world of fintech with the company's CFO. And the billionaire space race. Richard Branson touches the edge of space this weekend. Days ahead of Blue Origin blasting Jeff Bezos into the heavens. We talk about the shade being thrown at each other. Meanwhile, those stories in a moment. But first, record highs for all three U.S. indices. Let's get to the markets. Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta and NASDAQ back at it.
Absolutely, Caroline. Record highs once again for the S&P 500 and for the NASDAQ, all thanks to big tech, really leading that charge back to the green. And of course, you saw that massive sell-off yesterday. So people bought the dip, but they bought the dip in a very powerful way. You can just see that 1.42% on that big tech index. And this is, of course, as Treasuries see less of the love. I really want to show you because this kind of rings very similar to what you saw before the tech wreck. Because if you want to come dive into my terminal with me, you are seeing that we are actually at a peak. This is the S&P 500 relative to the rest of the world. Take a look at this. We're at a record. That's what that green dot over there is. The last time we were at that was right before that massive crash in those tech stocks in September, right before that election volatility. So something really interesting to remember is we've seen tech really help those major indexes up. Could they possibly bring them right back down? That's something to watch for. But like I said, with that growth outperformance, it hasn't trickled down to all of the other tech subsectors. And that's really what I want to point out today, because what's notable is that you're seeing some of the green on the screen in the likes of semiconductor stocks, for example, right at the top, 1.7%, one of the hardest hit sectors yesterday as well. And even remember all that noise about the DDIPO, the Chinese scrutiny. Well, they're coming back too because they have seen so much selling pressure. So people are quite literally buying the dip, 2.6% up for the NASDAQ Golden Dragon Index. And lastly, the NASDAQ Biotech Index not rallying by as much, but still in on the green, Caroline.
Kriti Gupta with all we need to know in terms of your market moves to end the week. Meanwhile, we also need to know to end your week was President Biden signing that executive order just a few hours ago to expand competition and crack down on monopolistic practices in the tech and healthcare sectors. Joining us now from Washington is Bloomberg's Emily Wilkins, and he name-checked, healthcare issues, whether it be your more expensive hearing aids. He was taking on McDonald's and Burger King, but largely, if you go into the nitty-gritty, it's a lot of focus on big tech and, consolidation therein. What did he have to say?
So President Biden released 72 different provisions in this overarching executive order. And yes, Caroline, you're absolutely right. A lot of them did touch on technology, asking federal agencies to really closely monitor any potential mergers for tech companies, to really look at tech practices, even in terms of internet service providers, just to make sure that they were being more transparent with customers when it came to what their prices and their fees are. And, this is coming at a point where Congress is stalled a little bit in getting any big tech antitrust legislation through. They passed that one House panel, but it hasn't yet been brought to the floor. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said that is because there's still some discussion within the Democratic caucus about what those bills should look like. You have a number of very powerful Democrats from the state of California whose constituents work with these companies, these companies are a big part of their economy, and there are concerns that some of these provisions might be too restrictive and potentially harm the companies in a way that could have some impacts on these lawmakers' districts.
Nevertheless, if I was an executive sat over at Amazon or Google or Facebook, I might be seeing that executive order being signed and looking at who was flanking him while that happened, and it being, the new head of the FTC, Lina Khan, as well. How much are we seeing the administration and the FTC working hand in hand here?
Well, for this particular one, when you have an executive order like this, if you go through and you really read what it says, it's a lot of the White House instructing or encouraging or asking different federal agencies to take on these sort of general tasks. Like it will tell the FCC to look into one specific thing, but then it really is up to the head of the agencies and other individuals in that agency to really come up with the actual standards and practices and how that will actually look and play out. So really the fact that Biden was surrounded by these agency heads today kind of speaks to their importance going forward here in making sure that different parts of this executive order are actually implemented.
Time frame, Emily, because it's one thing to get an executive order done and try and be bypassing Congress to a large extent. It's another as to how quickly any regulation will become a reality. Is there a realistic time frame that you can speak to?
I mean, for this, you've got now these instructions going out to these agencies, and these agencies are going to have to figure out how exactly to handle them. I mean, some of these proposals ask the agencies to do research or to look into certain things. So they're not asking them to do anything more than data gathering at this point on some of these initiatives. Other ones, you do see a little bit more concrete timelines as far as getting rules and regulations. But even so, this is a period of at least a couple months getting these regulatory items together. This could be several months, maybe even years for some of these items as far as putting them together, getting them implemented, and then actually enforcing them. And of course, there's always the chance with an executive order like this that Biden signs his name, he sends the instructions to the agencies, and then this is the last we wind up hearing of them.
Emily Wilkins, thank you for bringing us all the breakdown on that new executive order. Plenty of pages that you can rifle through coming up. Got any big plans for the weekend? I might be watching the soccer, but Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson, well, he's heading to space a little bit earlier. We'll discuss the latest in the billionaire space race. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Billionaire Richard Branson built his reputation with a series of daredevil exploits, and well, he returns to that on Sunday when the 70-year-old is scheduled to take a rocket-powered trip up to the edge of space. Now, the test flight for Branson's Virgin Galactic craft would be a step towards carrying ticket-buying passengers. A goal for many billionaires, it seems, is to race to space. Let's bring in Tess Hatch of Bessemer Ventures Partners, whose previous life worked for Boeing, for SpaceX. You're now focused on the investment opportunities within space and the applications therein, Tess. But first of all, just like humor us for a moment of this billionaire race that we're seeing, the shade that Blue Origin's throwing Virgin Galactic's way of the edge of space. And what do they call it? A high-altitude airplane. From your perspective, is Branson going to space?
Both July 11th and July 20th, when Richard Branson via Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos versus Blue Origin are respectively traveling to space, are incredibly exciting and monumental days for the space industry. We are getting one step closer to a future where I imagine we travel to space with the frequency in which we currently travel in an aircraft. And space tourism is one segment of a very strong and robust space economy. Satellites, launch vehicles, materials, manufacturing technologies, all of these we use in our everyday lives, whether it's to listen to the radio, watch television, navigate us to our destination. And July 11th and 20th are getting us one step closer to adding traveling to space ourselves to that list.
So travel is obviously one significant application. We already know with the other billionaire that's involved in space, the one that you were working with, SpaceX, like they're making a really profitable move in terms of taking satellites into space, doing that on a private basis. What are some of the business opportunities, rather than just travelers, but real applications you're looking at as well, Tess?
There's two main business opportunities. Launching constellations of satellites into space with unique sensors. And the two most frequent sensors are Earth observation, so taking photos of the Earth, and communications, connecting the Earth, which SpaceX is doing with Starlink. And in Earth observation, Planet Lab is doing. It announced its SPAC merger yesterday. The second one is launch vehicles or rockets, launching those satellites or assets into space. And SpaceX has done that with its Falcon 9 assets, and then Dragon Crew, launching astronaut Doug and Bob to the International Space Station last year, which is a very monumental launch as well. And Rocket Lab, which is the second private American launch company.
Is that the sort of exit that when you're looking at founding and helping fund these sorts of companies, SPAC seems to be the way that every kind of company is going to market at the moment, whether it be crypto, whether it be space. But these special purpose acquisition companies, the one that the likes of Virgin Galactic used, is this a good route for an exit right now from your perspective?
SPACs are just another way for companies to go public. but in particular at an earlier stage in their development. SPACs are just like a traditional IPO, but with one large structural difference. In the case of a SPAC, special purpose acquisition company, the SPAC can share long-term projections with the institutional buyers. That is especially suitable for companies with ambitions to generate billions in sales 5 years out.
I'm interested also in sort of looking at where else the applications are. So there's obviously a lot of market valuation being put to these companies, long-term perspectives, as you say, being put in the details of the SPACs. But what are some of the more exciting ways to invest and longer-term sort of business opportunities that it's interesting when you think about people going into space, it's not always that pleasant an experience. And many sort of feel the big viewpoints of a SpaceX or Elon Musk is that, we need to escape this burning planet that we're on and have a plan B to a certain extent. But is that the reality from your perspective? Is that the option?
I do believe we need to be a multi-planet species in order to survive. But this isn't to give up on Earth. It's because the technology needed to get to and sustain life on another planet will ultimately help life on Earth. For example, MRI and CT scanning technology was developed during the Apollo mission. When we landed astronauts on the lunar surface, we wanted to take photos. And that optic technology is being used in our hospitals every day, saving lives.
So what else it can be a byproduct of all of this, do you think? Like because it feels, I'm sure for many a viewer, when we tune in at 9 a.m. on Sunday and watch what is, the excitement of watching people to go to space and the thrill and almost the sort of story of it. But what are some of the realities that you think we need to confront what other positive byproducts can there be, like an MRI, that isn't just, a thrill seeker's joy moment?
Space tourism makes up $1 billion of a global $350 billion space economy market. There are satellites with the possibility of unique sensors being launched into space. And those unique sensors are up to entrepreneurs, students, people's imagination to come up with and utilize space for Earth's benefit and eventually utilize space for space benefit. I'm really looking forward to the Artemis program, which is a NASA program that's going to land the first woman on the surface of the moon. Now, these constellations can have various sensors as before. Earth observation, so taking photos of the Earth, and communications, communicating with the Earth are the two most common sensors at the moment. But there are so many others. There's a company, Spire Global, that my firm, Bessemer Venture Partners, has invested in that has really unique sensors, and I think does a really good job at this. We have AIS sensors for maritime tracking, ADS-B sensors for aviation tracking, and GPS radio occultation sensors for weather monitoring and predicting. All of this information can only be achieved and collected from space.
Tess Hatch, exciting moment for all of us on Sunday, but exciting longer-term perspectives for you, I'm sure, Bessemer Venture Partners. Great to have some time with you. Stay well. And meanwhile, of course, a reminder that you want to tune in on Sunday for our live and special coverage of the Virgin Galactic launch, starting 9 a.m. Wall Street time, 6 a.m. on the West Coast if you're getting up early. Meanwhile, we've got some breaking news. The G20, it looks as though it's set to endorse the global tax deal. Of course, that tax deal being that you'll see worldwide at least a base level of tax being paid by corporates, big companies such as, of course, the big technology companies based in San Francisco. They will likely be having to pay some 15%, but this is, of course, the G20 also warning of virus risks, great divergence in recoveries. Those finance leaders all based in Venice at the moment and discussing the key discussions on where tax and inequality might go. Meanwhile, coming up, we're going to be talking crypto. Visa is venturing into the world of it. We'll discuss the card company's latest move, the CFO, Vasant Prabhu. And Disney ended the last day of the trading week with a gain of almost 2.5%. Ticket sales for Thursday night preview screening of the new Marvel film Black Widow, reaching $13.2 million. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates could set it up for a $100 million opening weekend. The Scarlett Johansson film is being released in the theaters and on Disney+. This is Bloomberg.
His call signs Taskmaster. He controls the Red Room. They're manipulating.
Visa, you know it for, well, its logo on millions of credit cards around the world, and is stepping into the world of crypto, of course, as crypto assets continue to find their way into people's wallets. Visa has teamed up with 50 leading crypto platforms to make crypto spending, well, more accessible. Joining us now to talk about how it's all going, Visa CFO Vasant Prabhu. It is great to have some time with you because it's been really interesting watching your evolution of getting into the crypto space, allowing people to spend their crypto. And my first question to you is, when crypto is so volatile, when people look at it as a long-term sort of asset to hold and to speculate on, are they wanting to spend it as such?
Well, yes, as you know, crypto is volatile, and that's up to people who own crypto to manage for themselves. What we're trying to do is to make crypto available to use like any other currency. So if you have an account, let's say with Coinbase, and you have some crypto in that account, we want that to be useful for you. If you want to use it, you of course have to deal with volatility issues, but Coinbase will give you a Visa credential, a Visa card, that you can use at 70 million merchants, and you can buy anything you want, goods and services, like you would with any Visa credential. And what will happen is the merchant gets paid the way they normally get paid, in dollars or euros or pounds, and you use your crypto account and your cryptocurrency to buy goods and services. And we've had $1 billion of volume so far in these kinds of purchases from almost nothing last year. So the goal really is to try and make crypto useful like any other currency is. As far as owning it and the volatility, that's up to you as an owner to deal with. All we can do is help you use it.
And geographically speaking, where are you seeing most of that $1 billion, which is an extraordinary number, but already being spent? Because many people talk of the future of cryptocurrencies, in particular helping those countries that have very volatile currencies in and of themselves, that see significant inflation. I'm thinking of Latin America in particular. Is that where you're seeing a lot of the activity?
Well, certainly over the years, I think there's going to be more appeal for certain kinds of cryptocurrencies in places where they don't trust their own currencies. But right now, I would say it's a profile of who has accounts at places like Coinbase or Crypto.com or 50 other people we have partnerships with. It's those people who have Visa credentials, and they're using them. And they're using them to buy things they would buy with normal Visa credentials, a traditional Visa card that is with a traditional financial institution. It's goods and services, it's products you buy for your everyday needs and so on. So there's no particular skew in one direction or another.
Interestingly, of course, there's been an ability to be rewarded in crypto as well. Can you talk to us about how people are rethinking not only you're just spending your crypto, but you're perhaps spending your fiat and getting crypto back?
Yes, and that's an interesting innovation. We have a partner, BlockFi, and they will give you a Visa credential, a Visa card, and you can earn the usual rewards on it. You get miles in some cases, you get cash back in others. In this case, you get paid in crypto. So you actually get cryptocurrencies deposited into your account at BlockFi as rewards, and then you can hold them because you think they might appreciate in value, or you can use them just like you would miles or cash back. So in that sense, it's a great innovation. It allows those people who have faith in cryptocurrencies to get paid in a way that they might find more appealing than straight cash back or miles and so on.
And also, what are you seeing being spent in terms of the crypto that they are spending? I know you said that it's sort of to do with your partners and it's to do with certain crypto assets are more popular in certain parts of the world, but stable coins has been something we're talking about an awful lot, particularly as the Federal Reserve has been eyeing it. And how much are you seeing stablecoins being spent, given, inherently they're meant to be less volatile?
Yeah, stablecoins actually have been designed to be more useful as a medium of exchange. As you know, certain cryptocurrencies are being bought, like Bitcoin, more as a store of value, much like a digital gold, where stablecoins take the volatility out. If you have USDC, for example, the promise is that it's backed dollar for dollar with US dollars, and therefore you can redeem them at any point at the same stable value of one stablecoin USDC per dollar. So what we're doing is we're enabling people who are minting stablecoins and depositing them in people's accounts to use that stablecoin. In fact, we even settle in stablecoin in USDC today, where we will allow people to pay us in USDC at the end of each day when we settle, and then we will settle with the people that they owe money to, either in USDC or other currencies. And so in many ways, we are bringing stable coins, starting with USDC, into our system, much like we would any of the 160 currencies we deal in, or the 25 or 30 that we settle every night in. And we work with partners like Anchorage, who custody it and do all the trading we need to do to settle in the currencies we need to settle. So stablecoins could be a very interesting and important component of making digital currencies a medium of exchange, along with digital currencies as we see them develop around the world.
Of course, you're having to do plenty of due diligence on the leading crypto platforms that you're working with, understanding how they're abiding by regulation that isn't yet in existence in many ways. Vasant, how do you see the regulatory environment catching up with basically where you already are?
Well, certainly regulators are very active. Our brand is paramount. People trust our brand. We only work with entities that comply with all regulations. In many cases, the regulations are out there. They may change over time, but we only do business with entities that today are complying with all regulations or are regulated. They have to have very stringent anti-money laundering and know your customer policies. We have very stringent requirements in looking at their adoption of those policies and all the criteria that we have to use to ensure that they meet all our requirements, much as any other partner of ours would. So, the security, the safety, and the legality of what we do is paramount because in the end, it's what our brand stands for. People do business with us because they trust the Visa brand, and we will make absolutely sure that the security and trust that our brand stands for is not compromised in any way.
We've got less than a minute to go, Vasant, but quickly, $1 billion already spent. How much do you think it will be by the end of the year?
Oh, I wouldn't want to speculate in terms of how it's going to go.
We love speculation.
All we want people to know is that our job is to help people move money. Our job is to help people send money to whoever they want to send money to, whether they want to buy goods and services, whether they want to pay you or me, whether they want to pay businesses. And we're also a network of networks. In other words, we will connect to whatever network we need to, including blockchains, to ensure that money moves where it needs to move. So to the extent that people want to use cryptocurrencies as a form of money, our job is to enable it and to make cryptocurrencies more useful, absolutely in compliance with all the laws and rules and regulations. And the goal is to bring them and connect them to the mainstream financial system.
Vasant, great to have some time with you, the Visa CFO there. Vasant Prabhu, stay well. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, supporting minority-founded startups with Morgan Stanley. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, in for Emily Chang. Now, more on today's market action. We're going to get it back to Kriti Gupta. What are you digging into?
Absolutely, Caroline. At the top of the show, we talked about those Chinese ADRs, this idea that those Chinese tech companies, Didi's, et cetera, are really taking a massive hit this week until today. And with that, semiconductors as well. And I really want to show you the ADR index, the top 3 performers of the S&P 500 ADR index. Really this idea here that this has been under a lot of pressure. The index as a whole, really, these foreign listed companies here in the United States were actually down as an index together. But these 3 companies really stood out, highlighting this idea that not only did those Chinese tech companies, that NASDAQ Golden Dragon Index, which of course Alibaba is a big part of, but even the semiconductor stocks, came roaring, really pushing against the current in those ADRs in particular. I do want to highlight another major deal news right now, Stamps.com. This is a 1-year chart. Now, Caroline, that kind of bolded line all the way on the right, that is not the edge of the chart. That is the spike today in Stamps.com. This, of course, coming after Thomas Bravo is planning to acquire the company. Now, you think this isn't tech, but this is actually an e-commerce site for postage stamps. This is interesting. I don't use it very much, Caroline. Maybe you do. But today, that share price really skyrocketed. 67% of a premium is what Thomas Bravo is offering, Stamps.com for their shares. So that's really interesting. I really do want to highlight just a few more tech movers, though. Let's just start off with Oracle here. Some speculation that they may also be getting a defense contract. Remember, the Pentagon deal just got split to Amazon and Microsoft. Looks like there might be one in the works for Oracle as well. You can see that 2.5% gain there, but it wasn't all that great for some of these other stocks. You have, I'm going to start from the bottom here, Comcast, those net neutrality concerns. We're using that as a proxy for that Biden executive order, really weighing on the stock here. Biogen dealing with a potential FDA probe, which analysts say it's not going to make a long-term difference, but that was not enough to have stock, the investors, I should say, leaving the stock, Caroline.
Yeah, great moves. Interesting one on stamps.com with Toma Bravo, of course, a little bit earlier. Thank you very much indeed, Kriti. Meanwhile, my next guest says only 1.8% of venture-backed founders are Black or Latinx, respectively, and less than 3% of venture capital founders are women. Now, Alice Vilmer of Morgan Stanley is trying to grow that number, and part of that is through the Multicultural Innovation Lab and Demo Day. Alice joins me now, and it's wonderful to be speaking with you once again about the moves that you're doing with Morgan Stanley. And Demo Day, it's the culmination of months where you've been working with entrepreneurs, startups who came to you initially, pitched, and then you whittle it down to 15. Tell us how it's gone.
By the way, thanks so much for having me, Caroline. It's great to be here with you today. It went so well. It is the culmination of 5 months of our innovation lab where we're offering capital, content, and connections to these founders. And so we had 15 companies present from our lab as well as our partners, Hearst Lab and Newark Venture Partners. And it was a unique opportunity for them to meet over 800 investors that signed up for the demo day, hear their stories, hear their pitches, and make connections to help them raise money for future rounds and keep their businesses going.
Multicultural founders, female founders, what sort of businesses, what sort of industry groups are they just fully across the board?
Yes, they are fully across the board. We are a sector agnostic innovation lab that's looking at all tech and tech-enabled sectors. And so we're usually seeing media, we're seeing enterprise plays, fintech platforms, healthcare. It really is across the board, and you really start to see the breadth of founders of color and women, so Asian, Black, Hispanic founders, as well as women, who have these wonderful investable ideas that are beginning to open up the pipeline for inclusive innovation.
What do they lack the most? Where do they say they feel the barriers are? Many will come on to this show and others and talk about the lack of initial money being able to go in and pitch a VC. But where do you find the difficulty is for them in terms of mentoring that they need right here, right now?
Well, Caroline, you basically hit it on the head. Obviously, the capital is one of the main barriers to entry. We see what the stats are, and you mentioned them a little bit earlier. But a big barrier that we see with these companies is access. And that is really where Morgan Stanley shines, if you will. In a relationship-oriented business, we're able to provide those relationships both to potential investors and potential clients, which is what these companies at these early stage C Series A stages need the most, and helps them create and improve their traction, increase their flywheel, and effectively grow.
Now, it's so interesting. I've been covering tech a while, and my husband's been in tech as well, and he was always the guy who was getting things on Kickstarter, buying what became a Tile really early days, helping these companies raise money, test a product, and you get a beta application. But I didn't do that. For whatever reason, I wasn't there on Kickstarter or helping these companies source and innovate. I don't know why, I don't know what was holding me back, but I feel like now, as a busy mother, I don't really have the time to be getting involved in product hunt and the like. What sort of other interesting barriers are there that therefore perhaps, my husband's a person of color, but he's not a woman, are we finding that certain product developers, entrepreneurs coming from female backgrounds or from multicultural aren't getting, sometimes the test bed that they need, not only the capital that they need?
That is also an issue, Caroline. And so you have the Kickstarters of the world, which typically are best suited for consumer-based companies because you are able to test the platforms. You are able to buy the product and test the product. But when we look at enterprise-related companies or companies that need to scale outside of the consumer, you really need connections into enterprises. A lot of them are sales connections and or business connections. We will see that the best types of investors the best types of founders who come in who are in certain sectors who are either in sales positions or in operating positions in companies where they can now open up their networks. And so that gets a little hard when you have a solution to a problem that may be a new enterprise sale, or if you weren't at a particular company, or if your network is relatively small. Morgan Stanley is able to open those networks through our banking platforms, through our wealth management platform, to be able to find the connections that help them make those entry points to be able to sell the solution to problems that they're coming up with, particularly for the enterprise.
And remind us, who's wanting to come and hear from these demo days? Who's wanting to, I feel like every VC now must be aware that they need to be more thoughtful about the companies that they're looking to give money to and address. But is that the case? Are you getting everyone knocking on your door wanting to hear from these sorts of companies?
I will say we have been fortunate and effective in making sure that we are opening up the entrepreneurial ecosystem to founders of color and women. Clearly, VCs have come to us with respect to being able to diversify their own investments in their own portfolios. We're having VCs come to us to do friendly interviews as well as attend our demo day in order to get to know these founders and increase their touch points with founders of color and women to diversify their own portfolios. But what we also see in the attendees that came to our demo day are corporate VC. We see high net worth individuals. We see regular corporate clients of ours who come in and say, how can we not necessarily invest, but how can we get those companies into our platform? How can we become clients of those companies? And so we get a great subsection of, if you would, the early stage entrepreneurial ecosystem, including founders who also say, let me understand what these companies have done to get into this lab so that I can try to follow that footprint, that pattern, and to be able to access an opportunity like this as well. So we definitely get a nice cross-section of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the early stage ecosystem, from investors, corporates, and again, the connections that these companies need to make to boost sales as well as investable capital.
May that flywheel fly. Alice Wilmer, thank you so much for coming on of Morgan Stanley. Really interesting things going on over there. Meanwhile, coming up, China is cracking down on all things big tech. We'll take a look at how Didi's US IPO sounded alarms for China. That's next. This is Bloomberg. So here's how the vaccine makers ended the week. Pfizer announced it plans to request approval for a third booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, claiming it can increase protection against the coronavirus. However, federal health officials say, look, there's no need for boosters at this time and that current available vaccines are effective. Meantime, the World Health Organization says coronavirus infections are rising across most regions of the world as the Delta variant continues to spread. My colleague Tom Keane and Romaine Bostick spoke earlier with Andrew Picotts. She's of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health professor and virologist.
The Delta variant is causing disease primarily in unvaccinated populations. And the disease that it's showing seems to be a bit more severe than the disease we saw in similar age groups at the beginning of the pandemic. So if you're unvaccinated, the risk from Delta variant is greater of infection, and there's also going to be a slightly greater increase of severe disease from infection. So there's nothing good about being unvaccinated when you think about the Delta variant.
Where are we on the vaccination process right now? I follow the statistics. I saw something age over 12, fully vaccinated, 50% as well. Are you pleased with the rate of vaccination?
Every vaccination is a good thing. I would love to see these vaccination rates get much higher than they are right now. We've reached a stage where many of the people who are vaccinated now, obviously they're protected from infection, they're protected from severe disease. We haven't reached those levels that really give us a population-based benefit from vaccination yet. That's that herd immunity thing that you hear about all the time. It doesn't mean that the vaccine doesn't work against you individually. With vaccination helps protect you, but at some level, we get that added benefit that the virus is just so difficult to circulate in the population because of vaccination that even the unvaccinated get a benefit from that. We're not close to that level, and as a research scientist, that's what I really like to set as a standard vaccination goal.
Yeah, Doctor, a lot of talk now about sort of what the next step is for those folks who have been fully vaccinated. Pfizer, of course, coming out yesterday and talking about the idea of a booster shot. The CDC saying that, well, maybe not quite yet here. Where do we stand?
Well, all the data so far from the U.S. looks like vaccination, particularly vaccination with the mRNA-based vaccines, is protecting against Delta variant. So I like the fact that Pfizer has gone forward with the clinical trial to show what a booster will do. I think that's important data to have. I don't see it as an imminent thing in terms of a guidance for the U.S. population. But this virus moves quickly. Variants are emerging fast. And I think the Pfizer move is good in terms of preparing for the future. If we get a variant that's even more deadly than Delta, then a booster may be an important thing to consider. And having Pfizer completed the clinical trials for that is going to be a good thing in terms of helping us be prepared for that.
John Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Professor Andrew Pecot's there. The John Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is, of course, supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Now, let's return to China, of course, because we know that it's cracking down on big tech and private companies as the country looks to place regulations and controls on the booming tech market. Ride-hailing app Didi made its U.S. public debut last week, making it the second largest IPO for a Chinese company in the U.S. The IPO led China to ban users from signing up on the app. Joining us now, Bloomberg News reporter Crystal Tse. And of course, Crystal, you've been following this ever since, well, the IPO initially popped and then came crashing right back down. What is the future now of big tech in China? What does it mean if you are gathering data, but you want to be a global business?
Yeah, I feel like big tech is really facing scrutiny everywhere. Like U.S. talks about that. China is also talking about it right now. China's big tech really means that they have a lot of monopoly in the country, and this is exactly what China fears, is that its big tech potentially has too much power. It threatens the government itself. And for Didi's, what Didi really had is that the data of potentially secure locations that China doesn't want to disclose. So that became an issue. And since the crackdown for Didi, we have seen several IPOs from China. The ones that are listing in the U.S. have not gone through. Some of them traffic in the same data that Didi does. So the future for China tech in the U.S. is looking pretty grim at the moment. But it's not the first time this has happened. And saw a similar problem when they were listing in Hong Kong. It didn't list at the end. So, but investors have potentially short memories, and we can potentially see more deals coming back, but probably not in the very short term.
Feels as though the writing was on the wall back in November. Crystal Tse, she's, of course, going to be a busy woman with IPOs from America coming to America, but we'll see how many Chinese companies come to list here, too. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Meanwhile, coming up, we are, T-minus 2 days until Richard Branson heads to the edge of space. I have the latest on the preparations for Sunday's launch. That's next. And let's take a look at how Virgin Galactic ended the week, finishing, up some 9.5%. Didn't do so well on the end of the week, but certainly it has been crescendoing higher over the last month or so. This is Bloomberg. So Richard Branson's trip to the edge of space this weekend won't be, only a personal milestone for the billionaire. It will also mark a step forward in the race towards space tourism for the masses. But it's not just high-profile billionaires, apparently, and their rockets in the running. One company is working towards sending people skyward inside a space balloon. Bloomberg's Nikki Eckstein has more.
Looking for a vacation and have $125,000 laying around? You could float into the stratosphere on a space balloon. A new company called Space Perspective is changing the space travel game, aiming to use giant space balloons to bring 8 people at a time to a 19-mile-high, pitch-black lookout for astronaut-style views of the planet Earth. Its hydrogen-powered balloon flights went on sale June 23rd and are slated for takeoff in 2024. According to the company, they've already sold more than 200 tickets. The company's co-founders met while taking part in Biosphere 2, the famed failed experiment of the early 90s that explored the viability of human life in outer space. Since then, the pair has served as technical advisors to Elon Musk on human spaceflight, built life support systems for space exploration, and helped set records for the highest space balloon flight ever recorded. When their vessel, Neptune 1, gets its finishing touches, likely in late 2023, it will join a nascent space tourism industry, which is finally bearing fruit after years of hype. Also in June, Virgin Galactic got the green light to fly to space from the FAA. But Space Perspective is different from its competitors in several key ways. For one, it doesn't actually reach outer space. Although definitions vary, NASA sets that boundary beyond the mesosphere, 50 miles above sea level. International bodies put it higher at 62 miles, a measure known as the Kármán line. Neptune 1 gets only a third as high, achieving epic views but no time in zero gravity. The trade-off is a safer, smoother flight that requires no pre-flight training for its passengers. Those who book will arrive on site a few days before a trip, allowing some time to visit the launch pad, tour the capsule, and make sure everyone feels comfortable. The trips will last about 6 hours, departing well before the crack of dawn in order to see the world's most spectacular sunrise creeping out from behind planet Earth. Along the way, space travelers can get out of their reclining seats, eat a fancy breakfast, order mimosas from a bar, or chat up the pilot, who doubles as a tour guide. Eventually, the balloon will slowly deflate, and the capsule will land gently in a large body of water, where a special boat will pick it up and bring the passengers back to shore. Space Perspective expects to conduct around 25 flights in its first year of operation, ramping up to 100 flights per location per year. The goal, say the founders, is to scale quickly and bring space tourism to the masses, or at least those that can afford it. This is Where To. I'm Nikki Eckstein. For more on the future of travel, follow us on your favorite platforms.
Well, from balloons back to rockets, let's get back to the billionaire race to space. And this weekend's flight for Virgin Galactic and its founder, Richard Branson. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, who will be in New Mexico on Sunday for the big event. And I mean, kind of a little bit of shade throwing going on between, well, Blue Origin versus Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic just a little bit earlier on Twitter. What is going on? Is Richard Branson going to space or not?
Yeah, the debate is a matter of 15 miles, as that video just set out. So in previous missions, Virgin Galactic's spacecraft has gone to around 54 miles. That's above the line that NASA recognizes as space, quote unquote, or the line that you pass to become an official astronaut. But Blue Origin basically tweet that Virgin Galactic's system is nothing more than a high-altitude plane. Ooh. And their attempts to go into real space, the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary of space, at 62 miles, are more legitimate. And it's interesting because, you know, Branson got the FAA regulatory approval for this first before Blue Origin. If all goes well, he will go into quote-unquote space before Jeff Bezos. So there's no two ways about it, Caroline. This is just two billionaires racing to get to space, isn't it?
It's a bit pathetic, really, isn't it? I wish they could just celebrate each other and, you know, power each other along rather than trying to snipe at one versus the other. But what are you most looking forward to when you go down there, New Mexico? What are you envisaging will unfold? They must be super nervous no matter what.
What I find strange is this is the 22nd test flight for VSS Unity, Virgin Galactic spacecraft. You'll remember that in 2014, they did have a fatal crash during a test where one of the pilots was killed. But they've had a number of successful tests since then. The tension is in this high-profile man, Richard Branson, a billionaire, going into space. He's not actually on his own. That's what's so strange. This is the first time they'll do a full crewed flight. Two pilots, 4 crew members, so 6 in total. There are other human lives involved here. Yes. But if they are successful, it pushes the boundary for space tourism. It opens the door to civilians to actually pay to go into space, even if it's just for a few minutes of weightlessness.
You were just at Sun Valley, of course. It's been a busy week for you, jetting around. Jeff Bezos was there too, and of course he's going in a week or so afterwards. What's he been saying about his own Blue Origin trip and who will be going with him, of course? Remind us.
Yeah, so Jeff Bezos has not been saying very much other than on the occasional social media post. He is going alongside his brother, Mark Bezos, and Wally Funk, who is 82 years old. She will be the oldest civilian and human to go into space. She was a product of the Mercury program in the 60s, which is a program NASA ran to prove that women could go into space with the same level or capability as men. Imagine that, Caroline, in this day and age. And then one final mystery guest who won the auction, but we don't have the identity of yet. Bezos talks about how he's always wanted to go into space since he was a little kid. That's what captivated him. And as it stands, he will be doing that. He'll just be doing it after Richard Branson, whether he cares about that or not.
Well, seemingly, I think he might care a little bit from the tweets. But meanwhile, it's going to be a big day for England, all in all, on Sunday. Ed Ludlow, we thank you so much. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, though, as we mentioned earlier, make sure you tune into Bloomberg's live coverage of Richard Branson and, of course, the rest of his crewmates. They're going to edge of space, whatever you call it, but we're covering it. 9 a.m. New York time. It's going to be 6 a.m. if you're on the West Coast, so wake up early. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Stay with us now for Wall Street Week. My colleague David Weston will be joined by the former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, of course, the Rock Creek CEO of Sana Belshos, and PGIM's Nathan Sheets. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, and this is Bloomberg.